There are some loves we carry in the quiet corners of our hearts, unspoken, unseen, yet fierce enough to shape the way we breathe. She loved him without a declaration, without a confession. For years she loved in silence because sometimes love feels safer as a dream than as a reality. But then came this moment when the weight of her unspoken truth became heavier than the fear of losing him. And that was the moment her life began to change. For years she believed that silence was the safest way to love him. It was her sanctuary, her invisible shield. She convinced herself that speaking her heart would risk too much, that it could break the fragile beauty of what existed between them. In her mind, silence was a form of devotion. It was careful, pure, untainted by the messy complexities that words can bring. She could keep him close in her thoughts without ever inviting rejection. She could protect herself from the sting of an answer she feared might not be the one she hoped for. But what she didn't realize then was that this same silence was slowly stealing something from her. It was robbing her of the chance to truly live inside her love, instead of only imagining it. The truth about silence is that it can be both a refuge and a prison. At first it feels safe, like a warm cocoon you can retreat into when the world feels too uncertain. But over time, that cocoon hardens into walls. The love you thought you were protecting begins to suffocate inside you, longing for air. She didn't see it at first. She thought she was preserving the beauty, but in reality she was locking it away from the only thing that could make it grow: expression. Every glance she stole, every word she swallowed, every laugh they shared became a quiet ache. She could feel it in her chest at night, lying awake, replaying moments that might have been more if she'd only dared to give them voice. But she kept convincing herself there would be a better time, the right time. A time when the stars would align, when the risk would be smaller, when her courage would be greater. That mythical moment never came. And this is where so many of us lose years of our lives waiting for perfect timing that doesn't exist. Life rarely sends an engraved invitation saying now is the moment to speak. It's raw, it's uncertain, and most of the time the only way forward is to create that moment yourself. One day she began to notice how heavy her silence had become. It wasn't just about him anymore. It was about the way she was living her life. She realized she was becoming a spectator in her own story, watching love pass her by as if it belonged to someone else. That quiet protective space she'd built was starting to feel like a cage she'd locked herself inside. And in that realization she understood something life-changing. Safety is not always the same as happiness. Silence had given her safety, but it had stolen her chance at the joy, intimacy, and growth that only honesty could bring. The cost of staying silent had become greater than the risk of speaking up. And that was the first crack in the wall she had built around her heart. Because in love and in life, silence might shield you, but it will never set you free. When the words finally left her lips, it felt like stepping off a cliff with no idea if there would be ground beneath her feet. Her heart pounded so hard she could hear it in her ears, and every instinct told her to retreat, to swallow the confession and hide behind the safety she had known for so long. But something deeper, something fierce, pushed her forward. She realized that courage was never about the absence of fear. It was about standing in the middle of it, trembling and exposed, and deciding to love anyway. For so long she had measured her worth against his potential reaction. If he accepted her love, she would feel validated. If he didn't, she would feel shattered. But in that moment of truth, she discovered something entirely different. Her worth wasn't tied to his answer at all. It lived in the act of daring to speak. Love, in its purest form, is not a transaction. It is a declaration of self. It says, this is who I am and this is what I feel, without attaching chains to the outcome. When she looked into his eyes and let her truth out into the air, the world did not end. In fact, something extraordinary happened. She felt lighter. It wasn't because he said what she hoped to hear. Whether he did or didn't became almost irrelevant in that instant. It was because she had faced the one thing that had held her hostage for years, her own fear. And fear, when confronted, always shrinks in comparison to the strength you find in yourself. This is the gift of vulnerability. It is terrifying, yes, but it's also transformative. By letting herself be seen, she reclaimed parts of herself she had hidden away. She was no longer just a woman who loved in silence. She was a woman who had the courage to step into her truth, regardless of the cost. That shift changes everything, not just in love, but in how you live every moment that follows. Too often we hold back because we think protecting ourselves from pain will keep us safe. But safety without authenticity is not safety. It's a slow erosion of the soul. When you risk being real, you might get hurt, but you will also grow. You will learn that you can survive and know that rejection does not define you, and that self-respect is built in the moments you choose, truth over comfort. For her, this was no longer about whether he loved her back. It was about honoring the love she carried and giving it a voice. And in that act, she discovered that the bravest thing you can ever do is love without guarantee. Because win or lose, you still win by becoming someone who can stand tall in their own truth, unapologetically, beautifully, and free.